At the Mishnah. Okay, we're at 5A1, Daf Hey Amud Aleph. We are now approaching the second Mishnah of the Masechet. Ad matai shoalin et hageshamim. Until what time does a person ask for the rain? Okay, so remember, the first time we were talking about being maskir geshamim, mentioning the rain. Here we're talking about asking for the rain. What is that referring to? That's referring to barech alenu. So when a person asks, v'ten tal mata lebracha. Okay? Ad matai shoalim et hageshamim. Rabbi Yehuda says, ad sheyavor Pesach. Until Pesach passes. We actually saw this excerpted earlier on in the Gemara where we mentioned this opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. However, until when do we ask ad sheyavor Pesach? Which means that we only stop asking for rain after Pesach's over. Is that what we do? No. So in other words, what he's talking about is on Chol HaMoed Pesach, where we would say we do the prayers of a weekday. So you pray regular Amidah. So in that space, if you say Barechenu, Barech Alenu, which one do you choose? According to Rabbi Yehuda, you choose Barech Alenu. The whole of Chol HaMoed Pesach. When do you stop saying Barech Alenu? According to this Mishnah, at the end of Pesach, when Pesach is over. So the first day, at least according to the simple understanding of the Mishnah, when would you stop saying Barech Alenu? After Pesach. Now, if you remember, when we had the Gemara earlier, we had a bunch of different people, and Rafi actually scooped 2 or 3 of the opinions, if you remember, right? It was you. Well, maybe Ad She'avor Pesach doesn't mean the holiday of Pesach. Maybe it means the Shehitat Pesach. So if that's the case, then it's telling you that you stop before Pesach, which is actually what we hold, okay? Right. So we have that in the back of our mind that we already visited those opinions, and we'll see where we get to in the Gemara. Ad She'avor Pesach, but at least the simple interpretation is until the first day after Pesach. That's the first time we experience the Barechenu world of bliss for a shorter Amidah, which we always love. People go crazy, they lose their minds if we don't say Yehi Shem, because we save exactly 74 seconds. Rabbi Meir says, Ad sheyatzeh Nisan, until the whole of Nisan leaves. So what does that mean? Once we finish Pesach, you're still saying Barech Alenu. When do you stop saying Barech Alenu? Rosh Chodesh Mar Cheshvan. At that stage, you stop saying Iyar. Okay? So right when Iyar comes, that's when you stop saying it. But the whole of Nisan, you're still asking for rain. How does he get this idea? Where does he get it from? Shene'emar, the pasuk says, Vayored lachem geshem more umalkosh. And Hashem will bring you down rain. More is another type of rain, like we say Yoreh umalkosh in the Shema. Umalkosh, and also the rains of that are called malkosh. And when will Hashem bring it down for you? Barishon, in the first month. So according to Rabbi Meir, they're bringing it down in the first month, which is the first month is Nisan. So you see that God is bringing you rain in the first month. Now, this is really interesting, because we've already encountered this concept a few times already in Masechet Taanit. It's very important not to read just this pasuk, but to read the pasuk before it and the pasuk after it. Because let's say this pasuk appeared in the kilalot of the Chukotai. So God's like, Hashem's going to kill you like this, and He's going to kill you like this. And you know what else He's going to do? He's going to bring you these kind of rains in the month of Nisan. Then you know that that's a curse, indicating that actually you're not supposed to have rain in Nisan. However, if the pasuk before and the pasuk after is the middle of the berachot, Hashem's going to bless you and bless the fruit of your womb and make sure that you have lots of great things, and He's going to bring you the rain in Nisan. Then you know that actually the rain in Nisan is what's supposed to be, not what is an aberration for the sake. So since this is found in the berachot, in the blessings, okay, that illustrates that these rains are supposed to come in Nisan. So Nisan is a time of Geshem, Yoreh, Umalkosh, and therefore Rabbi Meir decides, based on the fact that it's considered a blessing, that we should be asking for it. Where else have we encountered this concept? That was the rebuttal, if you remember, in the first Mishnah. He's saying, yeah, we should say Mashiv HaRuach the whole day, all the days of Chol HaMoed. Rabbi Yoshua says to him, what are you talking about? siman kilala in the holiday. So if something is a siman kilala, that tells us we don't want to be saying it. If something is a siman beracha, that tells us that we should be saying it. So Rabbi Meir seems to bring a good proof from the pasuk that we should actually be saying and asking for rain all throughout the month of Nisan. Amalei Rabbi Nachman Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Nachman said to Rabbi Yitzchak, Yoreh b'Nisan, Yoreh b'Marcheshvanu. Yoreh comes, Yoreh rains, they come in Nisan. That's not when they come. Yoreh b'Marcheshvanu, they come in the month of Cheshvan, when it starts to be the rainy season. The Tanan, that we see in the Mishnah, Yoreh b'Marcheshvan, Yoreh comes in Marcheshvan, Umalkosh b'Nisan, Yoreh is the rains that start the rainy season. Okay, those come in Cheshvan. It's the first month after the month of the holidays. It's when it starts to rain properly. Umalkosh, and when do the final rains come? The last rains, if you will, before spring. That happens in the month of Nisan. So therefore, he who says that Yoreh, which in the Mishnah is spelled Moreh, over here, he's saying that Moreh is in Nisan. It seems clear from the Mishnah that that's not the case. Amaleh, Hachi Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So says Rabbi Yochanan. B'yemei Yoel ben Petuel, in the days of the prophet of Yoel, right, the book Yoel, in the days of that prophet, Nitkayem Mikra Zeh, this pasuk was fulfilled. Because it says over there, Yeter Hagazam Achal Ha'abeh, the excess that was not already consumed by the first wave of locusts, which are called the Gazam, was then eaten by the Arbeh. Ota shana, in that year, Yatsa Adar velo yardu gishamim. Already they were through the month of Adar. Adar comes right before Nisan. So it's right through the whole rainy season. They already lost Adar, so where are they up to after Adar? Nisan. So they're already up to the Chodesh Nisan and still had not rained yet. Velo yarda gishamim. Yarda lahem rivi'ah rishona be'echad b'Nisan. On the first day of Nisan, the first quarter of the rain that they were going to get that year came down and descended upon the earth. Amar lahem Navi Israel. The Navi said to Israel, now you have to get the background over here. There was a terrible king at the time who was a Rasha, leading the Jewish people in the wrong way. The Navi predicted and foretold that there was going to be a plague of locusts for 3 years. Okay, and then after that was going to be followed by a drought for another 4 years. Okay, so they've had 7 years disaster. The people are at the brink. They're literally at the brink, and we'll see how close they are to the actual brink.
But how do you know that? You know that just from, I guess, the prophets, right?
How do I know what from the prophets?
The story about the famine and everything.
Yes.
I read it in here.
Okay.
But I couldn't come up with that whole story that you just said.
It's in the Navi.
It's in the Navi, so you have to know the Navi.
Yes.
It's not fair.
Okay. The more you learn, the more you know, and not just locally, but across the broad cross section of Torah. Okay.
So why does some aberration that occurs?
By the way, shameless plug. Saturday night, right after Havdalah, Rabbi Ariel Mizrahi has a Navi class for 30 minutes. Faddal, get involved. So the next time we come across something in the Navi, you'll be like, oh yeah, I know what that is. I know who Obadiah is. Okay, fine. Good.
But this is like pointing to something that happened for a specific period of time.
Correct.
So why take something that happened once? Or
excellent question. We'll cover it. Okay. So the Gemara says, Amalhem Navi Yisrael. The Navi said to the Jewish people, Tseu uzir'u, go out and plant. So remember, they're in the middle of a drought that's been lasting years. Before that, locust. He tells them, go out and plant. Amru lo. Listen to how close they were to the edge. A person who has one measure of wheat or 2 measures of barley, all they have is a little measure, all they have is this small amount. Should he eat that and live to fight another day? Or or should he plant it in the ground, in the hopeless, parched ground, and die without any food? Amar lahem, he said to them, Afal piken, even though I hear what you're saying, Tseu uziru, go out and plant. I love being a fly on the wall in these moments. Could you imagine the rabbi in the Bet Knesset tells you, guys, you have 1 loaf of bread. I mean, you can't plant a loaf of bread, but you know what I'm going with this, right? You guys like, I want to feed my kids. Don't feed your kids. Go plant in the ground. Could you imagine? Afal piken, go for it. Tseu uziru, na'aseh lahem nes. V'nitgala lahem ma shebeketalin u'ma shebechorei nemalin. They were able to find in the walls of their homes. It was clear they were shown where all the squirrels and the rats and the animals, mabaref, the ants, they had taken whatever seeds they had taken from wherever, and they'd put it in their colonies. And it was shown to them. So they got a little bit of excess grain or barley or seeds or whatever. So what did they do? Yatz'u v'zar'u. They kept their own grain for their families. They fed it to them. And then what did they do with this extra beracha? They planted the beracha. It's an interesting thing I was thinking about. Imagine a scenario like that. You have something, and the Navi tells you go plant it. And then you're shown this extra, whatever, miracle grain in the wall. Okay? Which grain would you plant?
The one on the wall.
The one in the wall or the one you have?
The one on the wall.
Why the one in the wall?
Because it's touched by ants and mice and...
Touched by ants. That one is dirty. Okay, it's a good answer. What do you think?
Same thing.
You think the same thing?
Same thing.
Okay, same.
Holy grain.
Holy grain. So you're saying the other way.
Yeah, it's like Jack and the Beanstalk.
This is the magic.
I would actually...
This is the magic grain. So you're saying. So you're saying plant the one You're saying plant the one that they found. Yes.
Shouldn't you plant the one that the Navi told you to plant?
That's my question. Now, by the way, remember. Now, by the way, hold on a second. Hold on. This that the rats took, or the thing, whatever they took, it's not like they took a loaf of bread and then you bring eating the loaf of bread. They took a seed. Right. The seed that you're taking is now being planted. There's nothing that's going to be remaining in the seed when it actually grows if it was taken by an ant. So we're not talking about spreading the bubonic plague, through this process. But the Navi said, go out and plant. So I would think, 1 second, the Navi told me on this to go out and plant. And then Hashem backed him up and gave me some other stuff. So I would have planted the one the Navi told me to plant. But the truth is, I then realized that the Navi actually didn't say, plant this. He just said, go plant. He didn't specify which one. So there was no mitzvah. Had the Navi said plant this one?
But he did.
Sorry?
He did.
He said tzi'u uzir'u.
And they only had what they had.
Okay.
So by definition, they had to plant what they had, not what was in the walls.
You know how I look at it? It's like Avraham Avinu. Go up to the top of the mountain and make a sacrifice. He goes up to the top of the mountain, he makes a sacrifice. But what does he sacrifice? The thing that he found at the top of the mountain. The ayil acha ne'echaz b'svach b'karnav. Hashem says, go there and try to plant. If I go there with my shovel and my thing and I'm ready, and Hashem then shows me something else, then maybe that was what I was meant to ask. Be that as it may, I just thought it's an interesting sidebar. And I learned also other things from this. I was wondering, a person has money, you want to invest it in something, and then all of a sudden you get this windfall. Which one do you invest? The windfall money? Or the other? It's an interesting thing to think about, but it came to me out of the Gemara.
Fungible, just like the seed was fungible.
Yeah. It's fungible. It is fungible, but there's money that has a beracha attached to it. Can I prove it to you?
Yes.
The Gemara says that if a person wants to bring a korban, they're not allowed to bring what's called etnan zona umehir kelev pasuk. What does it mean, etnan zona? What if someone gave to a prostitute some money to be able to provide, get, let's call it services, okay? So he wants to get service. We could ask Deshaun Watson. Either way, so he gets services. That money that was then paid, that money is impure, even though money is fungible. But the money that was used for that, this money as it's coming to me, right, is something I can't use for a korban. Could you use it for a mitzvah? You could, okay? But use for a korban, improper. How about you took your dog, you sold your kelb, okay? This money I got for selling a dog. Could you use this money? I want to now go buy a korban, bring a Beit HaMikdash. Asur. Etnan zona mechir kelb pasuk. Okay? So you see that even though money is fungible, its fungibility doesn't necessarily mean that there's not something attached to the money in the form that it came until it's transferred into some other form. And exactly that's what the Gemara says. What if I take the etnan zona and transfer it to something else and then bring it as a korban? So that's a whole sugya. Don't want to get into exactly how that works. Okay. Carries on the Gemara. Go ahead. Plant. A nest was done. They went and they planted the second, the third, and the fourth. And now a second quarter of the rain came down for them.
Second, third, and fourth, that's days of the week.
Days of the week, okay? The second one, the fifth day. Hekrivu Omer Bashisha. They brought the Omer on Shisha Asar B'Nisan. Nimtzet Tivu'ah Higdila B'Shisha Hodashim. The Tivu'ah grew in 6 months. So one more time. When are we talking about over here? We're in Nisan. In Nisan they plant second, third, fourth. Fifth day comes the second quarter of the rain. When do they bring the Nisan? 16th day of Nisan. Nimtzet Tivu'ah Higdila B'Shisha Hodashim. Gidela Be'achad Asar Yom.
Wow.
Tivuah that normally takes 6 months to grow, grew here in 11 days. נמצא עומר הקרב מתבואה של 6 חודשים, קרב מתבואה של 11 יום. The omer that was brought normally from 6 months of growth was now brought from 11 days. ועל אותו הדור הוא אומר, and on that generation it says, הזורעים בדמעה, those who plant in tears, ברינה יקסורו, they cut, they reap in joy. That was that generation was said, pasuk was said about them. Haloch elechu bacho noseh meshech hazara. Those that carry on in these tears, they wind up carrying, they wind up receiving the continuation of that which they plant. My haloch elechu bacho noseh meshech hazara. What does that mean? Amar vegomer, Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, Shor kishu choresh, an ox when it's plowing, holech uboche. He goes and he's crying. He's weeping, yani. Ubahazirato, and when he comes back, ochel haziz minatelem. When he comes back, on the way back from the planting, so you have all these pieces from the planting which have now fallen. So as he goes, he cries because he's walking and everything's being done behind him. But as he returns, what happens? Everything is there lying in front of him because he's now returning along the same path as he does the lines of plowing. He now comes back and he's now eating it like as a lark as he walks. That's what it means that bo yavo, when he returns birina. Now, what's the implication of this for a human being? A person oftentimes, when they're living their life in forward motion, when you push play, so all that's sitting in front of you is your life as it's unfolding.
You don't see the forest from the trees.
Yes, you don't see, especially if you're planting the forest.
Yeah.
Everything that you're planting is behind you.
Yes.
So a person oftentimes can be doing a lot of things. They're spending a lot of money. They're putting all this money out in Jewish education, putting all this money out, in buying the mortgage of a house. And they're crying all the time that they're putting the money out. But as you make that loop round, you actually now get to eat the fruits of your labor. You can see it. What does it mean that he carries the bundles? And Rav Hizda said, those that say it was brought down in the Braita, Kana zeret shibolet ziratayim. Kaneh means we've turned the page. If you're following if you're following the English, okay, we're on 5A2. Kaneh means a stalk, okay, like we find there's the sea of reeds, right? That he was put in. So it's over there. It's called kanim. Okay. So kaneh, says the Gemara. Suf, yes. Yam suf, yes. Or Knesuf. So that's Yam Suf is from Knesuf. Right. Okay? So Kaneh, says the Gemara, what does it mean? It's referring to the weight of the Kaneh. So the stalk of grain measured 1 hand span, and the ear measures 2 hand spans. What is that? What is the hand span? Okay, what does that mean? When you're looking at the size of a person's hand, okay? The size of the person's hand is the size of the kaneh. That's how big it is when it grows. When it then develops, shibolet ziratayim is now double the size. So since it's double the size, so a person who's bearing his sheaves, whatever he planted is now double the size of what it was in the first instance.
But
so
what does it say al-mutav before?
What are you talking about?
When it says the Gemara, it says my noseh al-mutav, right? That's the start of that little passage.
Yes.
Where did it say that before?
It didn't. That's the vigo. That's the etc.
That's what I'm trying to understand.
They're expecting you to know not only Navi but all the
I'm asking the
Pesukim.
question.
So let me give you a little secret over here. You see that little Gimel, right at the beginning of the Hazorim B'Dima? Yeah. Follow the little Gimel. The little Gimel will take you to the full pasuk, at least in most Gemarot, and in most of the new Gemarot. You see it, Torah Ora Shalem. Hazorim B'Dima Nexoro. Haloch Elech Bachon Noseh Meshech Hazorah. Bo Yavo Berina Noseh Alumotav. He carries his sheaves. He carries the stalks. Okay.
Where is it?
Down.
Gimel.
No,
It's hard for me to see.
no, a little bit. No, here.
Yeah. No, say if you want the whole.
Okay.
I got it.
Now, what was amazing about this specific time, about this specific Noseh Alu Motav, was that in most instances, the ratio is not as large as this ratio that we found in this time, where it was literally the size of the shibolet was literally one. It was a 1-to-2 ratio. Okay, that's not normally the size of the wheat. If you think about it, normally when you see a stalk of wheat, the stalk is very big, and then the top is relatively small. So it's right many times the size. Here, it was literally 2-to-1 was the size of the shibolet, was the size of the fruit. So not only did it grow incredibly fast, it also grew very, very big. It's fascinating that we actually have in today's society, we have this idea called dwarf wheat. I don't know if you're familiar with this. So you have normal wheat, which is obviously very tall, and you have dwarf wheat, which is very short. The dwarf wheat that we've created, which is what we use now because it grows very fast, fascinating. They mixed the wheat with weeds.
Yeah, they engineered this.
They engineered this new thing called dwarf wheat. Why does it grow fast? Because they've spliced it with weeds, which grow very fast. So it's fascinating to think that what the Gemara tells us about, this wheat grew very, very fast, and the wheat grew very, very short. It's actually something that with the advent of science, we've now come to this stage, we've created something that Borei Olam gave them in a miracle. So many times a miracle can happen in a way of teva, but it's revealed in a miraculous way. They weren't planting anything different. They were planting what they always had, but they got what we would now call dwarf wheat, which is the kaneh and the shibboleth. I don't know if the numbers fit exactly.
The drought sprouts the wheat.
It usually sprouts weeds, but again, it doesn't. The ground couldn't splice weeds with this. That would have to be something that they did. All right, that they did. In this scenario, they didn't do it. I'm just giving an example of how something that sounds so outlandish, actually, we have an example of it occurring in an engineered scientific way. But that would happen by itself back then. Yes.
Now you explained to me exactly about in biology you have mutation, mutatia.
Yeah.
It's exactly what you're saying. It's a miracle that something shifts to a new thing. But you think, it's a mutatia, but actually it's a reason.
But again, consider the timing. That of all the times it mutated exactly then. And I think of this also. We talk about the power of Hakadosh Baruch Hu to make it rain. Today we can make it rain. Right. Do you know that? Yeah. We can also stop it from raining. You have these guys, Arab sheiks, oligarchs. They have a big birthday party outside. What are they going to do if it rains? You know what they do? They send helicopters up into the sky. They sprinkle silver, I think it's silver oxide or something like that, into the clouds, and it effectively, again, with oversimplifying it, it dries up the clouds and it doesn't rain. They can control the rain. So effectively, the idea though that could be happening not by a specific targeted thing, but that rather it would be dependent on people's mitzvot, averot, that's a miracle. So consider the timing, like we say, yes.
So we started with this Mishnah and Gemara about when we say Baracheno.
Yes.
Barech Aleinu until.
Yes.
Right now it's going to locust and this and that.
That's the beauty of Gemara. It's this fascinating, sprawling conversation. And that's, again, it was meant to be that way. It's not like reading Shulchan Aruch. That's not what the Gemara is. The result of the Gemara is the Shulchan Aruch, right? But he's picking out from the Gemara just elements, but also the elements that we follow according to halakha. So at least according to the simple pshat in the Mishnah, neither one of those opinions is what we do for Barech Aleinu, okay? But this conversation, that as it was happening in the Beit Midrash, someone would say something, they're like, oh my gosh, that Rav Hanina, I remember Hanina said something else, and the only connection will be that the same person said both things. And then the Gemara will return back to the conversation, okay? Amar Hezda, and some people say in the Braita. Let's go through this Braita for 1 second, and I'll come back to Emmanuel's question. Tana kana zeret shibolet zerataim. Amar Rahman Rabbi Yitzchak. Rahman said to Rabbi Yitzchak, "My dichtiv." What does it mean that it says Ki kara Hashem l'ra'av v'gam bo el eretz sheva shanim behanach sheva shanim may achol? 1 second. So we just read that there was a plague of locusts and then there was a drought. So 7 years they're without rain. For 7 years, may achol, what did they eat? Amar lehachi amar Yochanan. Yochanan taught, Shana rishona achalu masher bebatim. In the first year, they ate that which was in the houses. Shnia achalu masher besadot. They went out into the fields and they gathered whatever they could from the fields till they stripped it bare. Shilishit basar behemat tehora. The third year they ate all the kosher meat, all their livestock. Revi'it, in the 4th year, B'sar Behemat Time'ah, they started eating Nevelot, Trefot, they started eating all non-kosher animals, they were starving. Chamishit, Bashar Shekasim Ramasim. In the 5th year, they started eating the bugs, the rodents, whatever they could get their hands on, like some sort of survival TV show. Shishit, in the 6th year, Basar Benehem Ubnotehem. They unfortunately were reduced, many of them, to cannibalism. It was a terrible, terrible thing. Shvi'it Basar Zira'otehem. They would eat their own flesh. They were literally starving to death slowly. It's a disaster. L'kayem ma shene'emar, as a fulfillment of what it says in the pasuk, ish besar zero'o yochelu, where the Navi told them, if you look down, pasuk hey, you see it over there, vayigzor al yamin v'ra'eh v'yochal al smo'ol v'lo saveu ish besar zero'o yochelu. The Navi says in Yeshaya, he foretold that this would take place, that they would arrive a hunger that would be so drastic that they would be eating their own. Unfortunately, it's wild. We have actually examples of this during the Second World War. We have examples of this. And what's interesting is that they say that in the camps, when they would get a stage when people they would starve them and they would throw people into an area for the Nazis for their entertainment, and they would beat each other up to the point where they could sustain themselves from eating. It's wild. You think about this. And they said that the Russians were the first ones to succumb to cannibalism, because many of them had experienced some form of it from living in Siberian prisons, where the Russians also did extremely cruel things. Other people were unwilling to descend to it; they'd rather die, right? And they didn't actually go to such extremes. My father actually told me, just so we get a glimpse of this, when he was fighting in the war in the Israeli army, there were times when they were in a position they couldn't leave and they ran out of the food. But you can't reveal your position. You reveal your position, you're dead. So what did they do? He says they taught them what to eat from the forest, from where they were. My father said he remembers being so hungry they were eating grass. Could you imagine that? Unbelievable. Ve'amar le Rabbi Nachman le Yitzchak. Rabbi Nachman said Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Nachman and Rabbi Yitzchak apparently had some very deep and meaningful conversations. My dichtiv. What is this that it says? Bekirbecha kadosh ve'lo avo be'ir mishum de bekir. What does that mean? So let's look at the pasuk again. Always like seeing the full pasuk. Lo e'eseh charon api. Look down at the bottom. Vav. Lo e'eseh charon api. I will not do the anger that is in me. Lo ashu l'shachet. I will not return to destroy Ephraim, the Jewish people. Ki el anochi. For I am God and I am merciful. Lo ish bekirbecha kadosh v'lo avo ba'ir. And not a man amongst you is holy, and I will not and I will not 1 second. I'm just trying to figure out why they put both parts in the Gemara here. Oh, Mechila. Okay, now I understand. I wasn't sure why the Gemara was bringing this piece in here. B'kirbecha kadosh, there's something holy in your midst. V'lo avo be'ir, I'm not going to come in your city. Mishum dekirbecha, I thought there was a continuation of the pasuk. Mishum dekirbecha kadosh, since there's something holy in your midst, lo avo be'ir, I will not enter into the city. Now, if you take a look for 1 second, I want to show you Rashi. Mishum dekirbecha kadosh. 5 lines down in the wide lines. You got it? It's the last word on the line. Mishun b'kirbecha kadosh she'ata metiv ma'asecha. If you improve your ways, lo yavo hakadosh baruch hu b'ir. God will not come into the city to punish. That will be a protection for the city, illustrating Barminan the exact opposite way. So when he asks the question, what does that mean? B'kirbecha kadosh velo avo b'ir. It's not velo avo, and I will not come, as a disconnected and, but rather a statement that Hakadosh Baruch Hu won't do something because of a person's good deeds. Amale hachi amar Rabbi Yohanan. So said Rabbi Yohanan. Amar Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Hakadosh Baruch Hu said, Lo avo b'Yerushalayim shel ma'ala. I will not enter into the Jerusalem on high. Ad she'avo Yerushalayim shel mata. Until I come into the Yerushalayim below. Umi ika Yerushalayim lemala. Is there a Yerushalayim up in the heavens? A parallel Jerusalem in the heavens? In. Gemara says yes. Dichtiv, Yerushalayim habenuya, rebuilt Jerusalem, Ki'ir shechubra la yachdav, a city that was connected together. Connected together to what? It was connected together to its counterpart in the Yerushalayim in the heavens. In fact, there are many Gemarot that say that that's why it's called Yerushalayim with two Yuds, because really it should be called Yerushalem. Yerushalayim means that there's two of them, one below and one above. There's a parallel spiritual entity, city, so to speak, in the heavens that is, again, a spiritual idea called Jerusalem. So, lo avo, what does it mean that I will not come in Yerushalayim shel Ma'ala? Until there's holiness down below in your Jerusalem, so to speak, I will not enter into to punish the Yerushalayim lema'ala. Okay. The Gemara continues. And the Gemara says another interesting line from Rahman the Rabbi Yitzchak. We'll finish the daf and we'll continue next week. Rahman said to Rabbi Yitzchak, "My dichriv, what is it that was said over here? Uba'achat yivaru v'yikaselu moser havalim ba'etz." Let's look at the bottom of the full pasuk. Chet. Ube'echat yivaru, and in one they will burn. V'yichsalu musar havalim etz hu. So, if you let's read it in the English for 1 second, so we get the exact translation correctly. What is the meaning of that which is written? They are altogether senseless and stupid. Ubachat yivaru v'yikaselu. That word, the root of the word is from silliness, stupidity. Musar habalim, like from the word hevel, a rebuke of vanities. Each one is wooden. Etzu. What is this concept that we're being spoken about in such a caustic, in such a hard way, that God is saying that there's no logic in them? It's musar. They're just so vain they don't accept the musar. And then finally the pasuk ends by calling them even, that they're like literally like pieces havale. They're empty pieces of wood. What's this meaning of the pasuk? The pasuk says, "Amaleh hachi amar Yochanan." Yochanan explained the pasuk as follows: "Achat hi shemivaeret reshaim begehinam." There is one of these that burns the reshaim in Gehinam. Maihi avodah zarah. Tiv hacha musar havalim. Over here it says musar havalim etzu. V'chtiv ha'atam, and it says over there hevel hema ma'aseh tatuim. So the Gemara says that there's one thing that causes the reshaim to be burned in Gehinam. Let's look at Rashi for 1 second. The Gemara says 3 lines from the bottom. B'achad yivaru v'yichaselu musar havalim etzu. Ilav gezerah shava. If not for the fact that we had these two pesukim that say the same thing that connects them for us, mashma, it would seem to us atumim ka'etz, that they're closed like wood. That's all. Lekabel musar, to be able to accept musar. V'lashav ayu lokin, and therefore they were getting hit for nothing, because you know what? They're never going to understand it anyway. What's the point of giving them musar if they're never going to get it? They're like a piece of wood that doesn't learn its lesson. But then the pasuk says, "Ba'achat avera henosin," one sin that they were doing, yitba'aru akislim Hashem, that was going to cause them to be completely burned up. And therefore, the Gemara says over here it says musar havalim etz, the musar havalim, this musar that you're giving to them of vanities that's not penetrating. It uses the word etz because, and in another place, it tells you that this idea of etz is associated with ta'atuim, something that turns you astray, i.e. the worshipping of avodah zarah. So the Gemara is saying that when God says that this, the punishments of Gehinam are coming to these people, the one of the sins which is foremost in Gehinam is the sin of a person worshipping avodah zarah, based on the gezerah shava. Let's just finish the daf. The Gemara says, "Ve'amalei Rabbi Nachman Rabbi Yitzchak." Rabbi Nachman said to Rabbi Yitzchak, "My dichtiv." What does it mean in the pasuk? Kishtayim raot asa ami tarten hu dahavu esrin. What does this mean? That there's two evil deeds that the people did. Tarten hu. What does that mean? It's two that actually comes into the have esrin ve'arba that are 24. What does that mean? Rashi says, esrin ve'arba shivika lahu b'tmiyah b'parashat tishpot chavda l'avot she'avaru. Wow, that's a very heavy item. The Gemara, Rashi explains that there's 24 sins that they accomplished. And they're enumerated in the pasuk. So why does it say over here shtayim ra'ot that they did 2 sins, if actually they're then listed that they did 24 sins? But the other opinion in Rashi is what actually gives me pause. Rashi says she'avru al chaf dalet sefarim, that they transgressed on all 24 books of the Navi. There's 24 books in the Tanakh, okay? But that's wild to think about that. That on what did they didn't do? There's not a single thing that did right. Isn't that like wild? Even if a guy.
What do those books require us to do anyways?
Many different mitzvot, but not just the 613 that you find in the Torah. In the Nevi'im, we learn many different ways of living, perspectives, paradigms. You know, it sounds like it's saying over here that all 20. That's an amazing level to stoop to. That they're out completely. Like it's almost like I kind of feel like they say there's a great line that goes, even a broken watch is right twice a day. Like, how anti did they need to be? Like, I kind of feel like that's a concerted effort that you need to make to like not fulfill anything in the 24 books. Yeah, any. Okay. Ta'tenu dahave 24. The pasuk said, we're saying over here that shtayim ra'ot asa, they did 2 things wrong, but how can it say 2 if we say elsewhere that there were 24? Amale achi amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan explained, achat hi shikula kishtayim. There was one that was equal to 2. Ma'iniu avodah zara. It's equal to avodah zara. Dechtiv kishtayim ra'ot asa imi oto azavu mekor mayim hayim lachtzov lahem be'erot nishbarim. They left me to go and dig these empty wells that were broken. And v'chtibahu, and it says over there, ki averu yeh kitim v'ra'u v'kedar shalchu v'yidbonu me'od. It brings again this pasuk that they transgressed in these islands, and they re'u kedar, and they saw the lands of Kedar. Shalchu v'yidbonu me'od. Ha'hemir goy Elohim v'hem alo Elohim v'ami hemir kevodo below yo'il. Look at what they traded. People don't trade away their gods, but they traded me for nothing. So again, you see in the pasuk that there was a tremendous decree against the Jewish people, specifically about the fact that they'd abandoned God as their God and they were engaging in idol worship. I'm imagining that we're referring to over here this specific time, because as we know, in the first Beit HaMikdash, there was the punishment was for the 3 big sins. Second Beit HaMikdash was for Sinat Chinam. So if we're referring to a specific age in history, each age has the specific sin of their age. But I think that maybe perhaps what the Gemara is communicating is the Gemara is saying that once a person is Obed Avodah Zarah, then the entire Torah is out the window. And I think that that's a discussion perhaps for another time. But this idea that if you could have a person who worships Avodah Zarah. Let's say as an example, you have a guy who worships Yeshu. I don't know. He worships Buddha. He worships, some statue. But this, he thinks, or the religion that he's following, has him stop working on the 7th day of the week, which happens to be Saturday. Had that keep Shabbat 100% according to all the halachot. What's he doing it for? Buddha. He kept Shabbat?
No.
Yes.
Of course not.
Why? He kept
No,
it.
Of course not. He's doing it because for Buddha. His rest, even though the act is the same. So the question we asked, yes, but not reverse kavanah. You see, lack of kavanah might not matter. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Because it's Avodah.
Lack of kavanah is not the same as reverse kavanah. He's having in mind to rest, to remember the Avodah Zarah. All right? So in this scenario, maybe that's the answer the Gemara is giving, that this one mitzvah, this one Averah, which was really like 2, which was really like all 24 books, is once they traded God for Avodah Zarah, so any mitzvah that they did was for another God. So therefore, the mitzvah was completely ignored. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen.